So there I am, preparing for Aliyah from the UK, when I discover that my Ketubah isn't just a pretty piece of parchment we hung on the wall between the wedding photos and that weird abstract art my mother-in-law gave us. Apparently, this document is basically my religious passport, my spiritual driver's license, my "yes, I am actually Jewish" certificate that I need to wave at Israeli immigration officials like I'm trying to prove I know the secret handshake to get into an exclusive club. Now let me explain the strategic importance of this Ketubah business, because apparently being obviously Jewish isn't enough anymore. You need documentation. It's like needing a birth certificate to prove you were born while literally standing there, breathing and complaining about everything. My Ketubah occupies this unique position among Aliyah documents, which is bureaucratic speak for we need 17 different ways to confirm the same obvious fact. It demonstrates conclusively that I was married according to Jewish law, which inherently confirms my Jewish status, because apparently only Jewish people are allowed to have Jewish weddings. Who knew? The document carries special weight because it represents formal recognition by Jewish religious authorities that I'm actually Jewish. It's like having a certificate that says, this person is indeed tall, while I'm standing there hitting my head on door frames. Unlike secular documents that merely record boring civil facts like David married Sarah on Tuesday, the Ketubah embodies a religious court's acknowledgement of my Jewish identity, making it especially persuasive evidence for Israeli immigration authorities who apparently need peer review before they'll believe I'm Jewish. But here's where it gets properly mental. While my Ketubah is supposedly this powerful religious documentation, Israeli authorities still insist I need a government-issued marriage certificate with proper apostille certification. So I need both religious proof and civil proof that the same event happened, because apparently my Ketubah might be lying about my wedding. It's like needing both a photo of yourself eating dinner and a receipt from the restaurant to prove you had dinner. The Ketubah supplements but does not replace civil requirements, creating what they call a dual documentation approach, which is fancy talk for we don't trust you, so bring everything. Now beyond my own Ketubah, which apparently only proves half of what they need to know, I also need my parents' Ketubah. My parents' Ketubah, because proving I'm Jewish isn't enough. I need to prove my parents were Jewish enough to create someone Jewish enough to be Jewish. It's like needing documentation that my grandmother knew how to make chicken soup in order to prove I'm genetically predisposed to feeling guilty about everything. My parents' Ketubah serves several vital functions, the most important being that it provides contemporaneous religious documentation that my Jewish parent was recognized as Jewish at the time of their marriage. This is particularly significant because it represents independent verification of Jewish status from decades before my Aliyah application, when such documentation was created for religious rather than immigration purposes. In other words, it proves my parents weren't playing the long game, getting married Jewishly in 1975, just in case their future son might want to move to Israel in 2025. For those claiming Jewish identity through maternal lineage, the parents' Ketubah can definitively establish that your mother was Jewish when you were born, because apparently there's some concern that she might have temporarily stopped being Jewish during labor and then resumed being Jewish afterward, like some sort of religious power switch that gets toggled during childbirth. In cases involving patrilineal Jewish descent, the parents' Ketubah assumes even greater importance, because patrilineal claims face enhanced scrutiny from Israeli authorities. This is like saying, we're suspicious of your father's Jewishness, so we're going to need extra paperwork to believe he was capable of participating in Jewish life. Your parents' Ketubah shows not just that your father was Jewish, but that he participated in Jewish religious life through proper halachic marriage, rather than just wandering around being accidentally Jewish without official documentation. The parents' Ketubah also helps establish family patterns of Jewish observance, which sounds like they're looking for evidence that my family has a track record of being consistently Jewish over time, rather than just occasionally dabbling in Judaism like it's a hobby we picked up during lockdown. Israeli authorities apparently want evidence of sustained Jewish identity across generations, because they're worried about people who might be just temporarily Jewish, like a trial membership at a gym. But here's where it gets really fun. The discovery that your original Ketubah has been lost can initially seem like a significant obstacle to your Aliyah plans. Initially, like finding out you've lost the receipt for your Jewishness and now you can't return it for store credit. However, Jewish law and modern administrative practices provide several viable pathways to resolve this documentation gap, which is bureaucratic language for your paperwork emergency. According to traditional Jewish law, when a ketubah is lost, religious authorities consider it both permissible and necessary to create a replacement document. This principle recognizes that the ketubah serves ongoing legal and religious purposes that shouldn't be negated by the accidental loss of the physical document. It's like saying, just because you lost your diploma doesn't mean you forgot everything you learned at university, so here's a new one. The replacement ketubah carries the same religious and legal weight as the original, provided it's created through proper channels, which means you can't just print one out at home using Comic Sans font. Your first step should be contacting the rabbi who performed your wedding ceremony, assuming he's still alive, hasn't moved to Florida, and remembers performing your wedding among the hundreds of others he's done. Many rabbis maintain detailed records of ceremonies they've performed, and some may have retained copies of the Ketubah text because apparently some rabbis are better at filing than you are. If the exact document isn't available, the rabbi's records can provide the necessary information to recreate an accurate replacement, like reconstructing a recipe from memory after you've thrown away the cookbook. If the original officiating rabbi is unavailable, whether due to retirement, relocation, or having achieved the ultimate Jewish goal of complaining so much that he ascended to a higher plane of existence, you should reach out to other members of the Beit Din who witnessed your marriage. Jewish weddings typically require a 3-member rabbinical court, because apparently one rabbi confirming you're Jewish isn't enough. You need a whole committee to vouch for your religious authenticity. Securing your parents' ketubah often presents unique challenges, particularly given that the document might be older than some countries, and the likelihood that everyone involved in creating it has probably moved on to the great synagogue in the sky. However, several strategies can help locate or replace this crucial documentation. Begin by searching through family records, which in most Jewish families means diving into that mysterious closet where important documents go to hide behind boxes of Passover dishes and broken electronics we're saving just in case. Contact relatives who may have retained copies or photographs of your parents' ketubah, because apparently in the 1970s, people handed out copies of their religious marriage contracts like wedding favors. Wedding photographs sometimes include images of the ketubah signing ceremony, because nothing says romantic wedding moment like documenting the contract negotiations. Contact the synagogue where your parents were married, even if decades have passed and the building has been converted into a Starbucks. Many synagogues maintain historical records, and successor rabbis often inherit documentation from their predecessors, like some sort of religious archaeological treasure trove. If the original synagogue no longer exists, check with local Jewish historical societies, because apparently there are people whose job it is to maintain records of who married whom, according to Jewish law, 50 years ago. When traditional replacement options prove insufficient, modern technology offers an innovative solution through electronic certificates issued by recognized Batei Din. This is basically like getting a digital receipt for your parents' Jewish wedding, because we've entered the age where even ancient religious ceremonies need to be backed up to the cloud. An electronic certificate from a qualified Beit Din provides the same evidentiary value as an original Ketubah for Aliyah purposes, making it a fully acceptable substitute, like a PDF version of your Jewishness that you can email to Israeli immigration. The certificate doesn't need to come from the original Beit Din that oversaw your wedding ceremony. Any recognized Beit Din with proper authority can issue the electronic certificate, which is like getting a replacement driver's license from any DMV office rather than having to return to the specific one where you originally failed your parallel parking test 3 times. But here's where the real comedy begins. The effectiveness of any Ketubah replacement depends heavily on its source's recognition by Israeli authorities. There's no publicly available list of approved rabbis, so it's like playing religious roulette, where you don't know if your rabbi is on the approved list or the we don't trust this guy list until you submit your paperwork and wait to see if they accept it or send it back with a note saying, "Try again with a more orthodox rabbi." Orthodox rabbis and Orthodox Batei Din generally receive the highest level of acceptance from Israeli immigration authorities, which means that if your wedding was performed by a Reform rabbi, you might need to find an Orthodox rabbi willing to vouch for the fact that yes, you really did get married, and yes, it really was Jewish enough to count. Conservative rabbis face moderate scrutiny, but are often accepted, which is like being in the middle child position of Jewish religious recognition. The certificate must include comprehensive details about your Jewish marriage ceremony, explicitly confirming that both parties were Jewish at the time of marriage. This information helps Israeli authorities understand not just that a Jewish ceremony occurred, but that it involved individuals who were halakhically eligible for Jewish marriage, rather than 2 random people who wandered into a synagogue and accidentally got married while looking for the bathroom. When pursuing Ketubah replacement or electronic certification for your Aliyah application, timing and preparation become crucial factors. Begin this process early in your Aliyah preparation, ideally 12 to 18 months before your planned immigration date, because apparently proving you're Jewish takes longer than most people's actual Jewish education did. Gather all available information about your original wedding ceremony and your parents' ceremony before contacting potential certifying authorities, which means you need to become a detective investigating your own family's religious life. This includes dates, locations, names of officiating rabbis, witness information, and any surviving photographs or documentation from the ceremonies. The more complete information you can provide, the easier it becomes for a Beit Din to issue comprehensive replacement documentation, because they need enough details to basically recreate your parents' wedding day like they're making a documentary about it. Consider obtaining multiple forms of supporting documentation rather than relying solely on the Ketubah replacements, because apparently one type of proof that you're Jewish isn't enough. You need backup proof and backup proof for your backup proof, like you're preparing for a religious audit by the most suspicious accountant in history. Create a systematic approach to document collection that addresses both your generation and your parents' generation simultaneously, which means you're essentially building a family tree made entirely of Jewish paperwork. This coordinated strategy ensures consistency in your documentation and helps identify any gaps that need to be addressed through alternative evidence or community testimony, because if there's one thing Israeli bureaucracy loves, it's comprehensive documentation that leaves no stone unturned. When seeking replacement of parents' ketubot, be prepared to provide as much detail as possible about the original ceremony, including approximate dates, locations, names of officiating rabbis, and any family testimony about the wedding's religious character. This information helps certifying authorities create accurate replacement documentation that reflects the original ceremony's halachic validity, because apparently they need to verify that your parents' Jewish wedding was Jewish enough to produce someone, Jewish enough to be Jewish enough for Israel. The Ketubah or its electronic replacement represents just one component of your comprehensive Aliyah documentation package. When properly obtained and presented alongside your other required documents, it contributes to a robust application that demonstrates your eligibility for Israeli citizenship under the law of return. Understanding both its importance and its limitations ensures you can navigate the documentation requirements effectively while maintaining realistic expectations about the overall Aliyah process, which is diplomat speak for prepare yourself for a bureaucratic adventure that will test both your patience and your filing skills. By the time you're done gathering all this Ketubah documentation, you'll know more about your family's Jewish wedding history than most people know about their own current marriages. You'll have copies, electronic certificates, rabbinical testimonies, and probably a PhD-level understanding of Jewish marriage law, all to prove something that everyone who's ever met you already knows. You're Jewish, you want to move to Israel, and you're prepared to drown in paperwork to make it happen.